Oh, metal, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is what it's the path I've chosen to do, but I can seem to get it to go whichever direction I want it to go in the end, if I hit it hard enough. I do approach it in a very sort of functional, practical manner. Obviously, I want it to look beautiful and amazing and really fit the environment that it's going in. But fundamentally, it normally needs to it serves a purpose to either, give brighten up a dull corner and give it a new beginning. I do like galvanized steel. I think it weathers softer. It's almost the metal itself seems to be sort of preserved. It doesn't go rusty, it's not too shiny, so it sort of holds itself together, and it changes tones depending on the season. I think I do break it right down to the functional things in it regarding it can't hurt anyone, it can't kids. I want children, if someone wants to climb on it, they can climb on it. It's got to stand the test of time. It's got to look great, and stand alone, be there forever. Well, as long as you can be. At the very beginning of a project, it's just such a pleasure to stay at home in the office at home, sitting at the drawing board, with the music on, and have this sort of clean process where I'm working it all out on paper and doing the drawings and thinking, and that really is the best bit. The material that I use there is a lot of energy that goes into producing a sheet of metal. It's no innocent material, but it does just break down and go back to where it came from in the beginning. So I've designed a sculpture which is in relation to those, which is hopefully going to be going on the seafront. Still not quite sure where it's going yet, but it will be hopefully a big stack of mussel shells. So I want to create lots of concaved mirrored surfaces. So anyone who's looking at the sculpture will see themselves upside down, as the world is upside down sometimes, isn't it? The gate, for instance, I mean, that it has a really I've tried to create something that's got an industrial, heavy gauged feel, which suits that alleyway. I mean, the alleyway is really oppressive. It's tall buildings and graffiti and fire escapes, and so that has got a heaviness to it, which works in that environment.
It's very interesting because as a maker, I think you do have a lot of confidence in what you're doing and you trust your materials and your process. But in the making of a piece, there's always that time when you just think, what am I doing? Is this really going to work? Well, the brief was to make a piece of work which amplified the straw bale build for the new Country Park Visitor Centre. The idea of the sculpture was really to create a talking point to link people back to the building and how it's been made and what it's been made with, so that it sits and rests comfortably within this beautiful landscape. It wasn't specified whether it was temporary or permanent, inside or outside, so I had a lot of freedom to interpret this brief. Really, honestly, due to time constraints and funding, I opted for an indoor piece that is as permanent as the materials will allow. However, it's a very, very delicate piece. It's quite ephemeral, but it has a kind of inherent hidden strength to it, the way it's been bound together, held together. I've used a technique called twining, and also a Maori technique, which just twists fibres together to hold individual strands of straw together. So it was incredibly difficult, delicate work to do to make the sculpture. yeah, having seen it again now, I've kind of fallen back in love with it. So it's really nice to have handled it and smelt it, and yeah, to have seen it again. So it does seem to sort of have an element of clothing to it as well, doesn't it? As a piece. It's got that sort of sense of a peacock tail, of display, of kind of shouting, "Here I am, aren't I marvellous?" Again, a bit like kind of sun rays. Just it has this sense of movement, which is really nice, and that it is flexible. And I'd really love to see it maybe hanging in a sort of a wing sort of arc over people's heads. And then seeing it actually when it's put in the place where it's supposed to be, that will be fantastic, because just relationship and context of pieces of work for me are really important, and they just sort of sing together in the right space. So the main entrance is here, and there was a possibility that it might hang suspended at some point, so that when you come in, you see it from... I was sort of thinking, yes, of course, because I just like to expand to fill the entire space. Of course. But because I think as a wing, it needs to be actually hung asymmetrically. It just needs to sort of have a fall on it, an arc, which may just be a sort of a bit of a divide between this space and that space. I think it's going to be here, actually.
My name's Ben Urban. I'm an artist slash co-founder of Flatland Projects, which is an artist-led project space based within the Source Park in Hastings. We work with emerging artists who are nationally, regionally, internationally, and our underlying premise is to bring emerging practice to Hastings and to give artists the opportunity for a first opportunity to realise a more major project. Luckily, we've been funded by the Arts Council for the last year now, which has given us a lot of autonomy in order to allow artists to develop and understand projects in a way that isn't in the arbitrary sense of curators, artists, and the hierarchical kind of institutional way of making exhibitions. And we're really thinking about how we work in a collaborative sense with artists as artists too. So I'm working on a project called the Moonlight Reading Room, which is set on Moonlight Island. It's a fictional world of darkness and nighttime, and really thinking about how the interiors and the exteriors of this fictional environment on this island can become uninhabited, but through furniture can imply human presence and human form. And the moon feels like this thing that comes around to overtake the day, and when something has that amount of power and energy, it feels like it's something that needs to be respected and understood. And really thinking about the vastness of the sea, and the sea being something that isn't comprehensible, at least for myself, and just being set offshore, what that means to be surrounded by water. And what I've always thought about with Hastings as a town to grow up in is that it's got, if you live inland, you have 360 degrees around your hometown, and Hastings has 180 degrees. And I've always thought about kind of what that last 180 degrees off the shore means.
Black Lives Matter movement right now has changed the way I understand my practice, my role, and what it is I need to be doing in a very fundamental way. The real surprise in the work that I've been doing was that at a certain point I understood that I'd been accepted and received as a trusted white ally. or as Maggie Scott would call me, a beloved ally. And that wasn't something I was expecting to happen, but the best way of describing the result of that was that the work that I was doing towards instigating some new commissions, COVID commissions, that related specifically to inviting our Black community to be represented much more explicitly in 2020. There was a moment in that process where it was very complicated, having initiated these commissions, how they were to be put out without being handed over by a white woman. It was very complicated, and there was a week when I was very unsure whether, even though everything was in place, we were going to be able to do anything with them. And in that week, I was given some information that led me to understand that I was trusted and I was accepted, and that I could put those commissions out under my own name. Is the communication and the network and the relationships, and within that, where there is trust, and the trust is the really big thing. I think that as a white woman, my battle has always been working in the art world as a woman, and as I've got established and confident, I've part of what I had to do was to really take that confidence with me into any situation I went into. And the really big change for me is to finding myself in situations where I understand that my presence is making that space, potentially making that space unsafe for a Black woman, and working out how to bring all of myself and my experience and my love into a conversation with someone, but at the same time understanding that I have my own blind sides, and that I need to really understand what it is that's happening when I enter a conversation with for example, a creative Black woman. And that's been and not to lose my own confidence in my passion and what it is I want to be doing and how I want to be working, but at the same time really becoming sensitive to understanding that I can, it's very easy to cause microaggression within what might seem like the most basic kind of simple conversation with someone. So that's really what I understand my work to have been, is to get to a point where I feel confident that I have self-educated, but also I've been living, and I've been really working on every level of my own life. But I also am at a point with my own journey as a woman in the art world where I have the ability to support and help elevate other artists, and in particular have an interest in young artists.
When I was growing up, my life was crazy in the sense, like, my friends were dying left, right, and center. They were getting shot, stabbed. Like, I thought I weren't gonna make it to 21. Really, really, real and seriously, I thought by the time I'm 21, I won't be here anymore. I used to say it to my mum. So, yeah, I was 17. I was sitting in the park with all my friends, chilling, and one of my friend's older brothers went past the park. So I shouted to him. I was like, "Yo, where are you going?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to college." But this is in summer holidays. I'm like, "Why are you going to college in summer holidays?" There's media courses. If I do media, then I can make the production or be in a production. I like the sound of that. So I just picked media. Simply that, literally. And then, yeah, I got to college at the first week of college. It was lit. We was making adverts. We was making like TV shows and stuff. I got to be in front, I got to be behind the camera, I got to see like, I'm learning about media studies, theories, Marxism, all this kind of stuff, semiology, semiotics. I'm like, yo, this is crazy. Like there's actually like studies, like there's actually like things on this. So yeah, it was for me. I just thought, yeah, let's go. I think I was still kind of waiting for the old normal to come back. I'm not gonna do anything until everything goes back to normal. And then it's kind of like everyone else around me was more on like, nah, let's just get on with it. Let's just film this like this instead, or let's do this shoot somewhere else instead of that and change it. And then it made me think, all right, cool, you want to get the bag, let's get the bag then, you know, let's go for it. And it's just don't wait around for anything to pan out, you know? Keep planning, keep your contingency plans, and just stay positive, really. That's the like, this is, right now we're in like a energy struggle, yeah? And you gotta really charge yourself positively with that positive energy. That's gonna be what is gonna keep your longevity, if anything. It's just positive energy. I know it might sound silly, but it's worked for me, to be fair, you know?
Street art is taking a platform and giving it to the public for free, so we can all enjoy it as equals. It's about sharing ideas in an open source, absolutely no judgment, without galleries telling us what to do, how to do it. So street art essentially is absolute and complete freedom for an artist. I think it's interesting to find spaces that people don't really care about. Well, this area is very multicultural, so I wanted to create something that everybody could enjoy. The flowers, everything else, she's a queen. She's meant to be the queen of Queen's Road, that's what I call her. But it's just meant to be something to inspire and to welcome all people. With tagging, it's considered a dirty art form. But if you think about the caveman, he was nothing more than a prolific tagger himself. It's mark making, and mark making is the basis of all artwork. So people scorn at it, but don't, because although it's vandalism, it's not vandalism, it's art in its own platform. It has no rules, and that's how art should be.
But I think, you know, anyway, as you get older, things change and the way you work and live changes and what you do. I mean, I've got really, since I've moved up to Orr, which was in 2010, because I've got a massive back garden and a front garden, but I've got massively into gardening. So my kind of badger track, if you like, you know, like where I go and what I do has changed. And it's changed again slightly during lockdown, but I'm sort of embracing being a kind of ageing hermit. And I've been really enjoying being here. My house is right on the main road. It's actually set back from it slightly, but my front garden, which I've been developing for the last 3 years, is a wild garden, which will then partially become a dye garden. But I have a good relationship with a lot of the people who walk past, because the front of my house is painted with murals. So it's like whatever is in my head ends up being all over my house and in my garden and in my kitchen. It's all the same thing all the way through. So I suppose I've just become more myself over the years, and I don't go to as many private views or any of those things because I'm too busy doing what I'm doing. Although I did have a sort of gallery come shop myself for many years in Hastings. For 7 years I had Fab and Groovy. And it wasn't a white wall gallery at all, it wasn't like that, and it never was intended to be. But I think that I just think there's room for a bit of everything, which maybe sounds a bit facile, but it's kind of part of the mix. I think, you know, that sort of very formal space works in some ways as part of what is, you know, basically the art business, you know, the sort of industry of art, because, you know, I know professional artists, and that's a very important part of how they get their work seen nationally and internationally, because things are accepted on that very serious level. But there's so many different ways of showing art. I mean, I'm not a gallery artist in that sense. My stuff works much better. Like when I did Open Studios here in 2018, it worked brilliantly because it was me in my own setting showing my own work. Personally, I prefer something where the language is immediately apparent and you don't need to ask any questions about it, because you can either completely get it or completely not get it, possibly, and respond with it without having to be told anything about it. I mean, for me, that's a really successful piece of work. So really everything that's here that I've made, or that was here that I've developed, it's all part and parcel of the same thing. The whole approach to having somewhere where I could live and work is just as much about the outside of the house and of the garden as of the inside of it. And it's its own kind of microcosm, it's its own kind of world, with the food, the things that come into the house, the things that I grow, the people that visit. It's all interconnected, the same as all the mediums that I use in my work.
I suppose in many ways I've always worked sort of independently, really. I mean, I'm not sure for me that this is going to change very much at all, if I'm honest. Apart from, obviously, is that my work is social based, so there's a problem there because of this whole thing. I mean, it's kind of interesting, isn't it, of how we look upon humans at the moment as a threat because they could give us this thing. So I'd say that's about the only way it's impacted on me. I have spoken with other artists who have gone through a bit of a rough time, and also I find really interesting, most of the artists I've talked to, not just here in Hastings, but in Wales and in London, the people I know, hardly anyone's been making any work. Life is bloody bizarre now. You know, like for instance, I mean, we're just social animals. And it's that wonderful wanting to go for a dance, listen to a band, you know, all of those things, they're not there. They're cancelled. So that's a bit that I find kind of strange, because if you look around you, you think, oh, life's back to normal. But in reality, of course, it isn't. I suppose for me as an artist, there's sort of two strands to my work, and there is commissioning going on, because, you know, a lot of my work's is work that's been publicly cited, so like Reykjavik Airport, Brighton Hove Football Stadium, hospitals. And then the other side is our personal projects. I think I kind of looked at it early on, and I've always had a problem with this one of trying to make it totally in the gallery world. And I think sort of early on, you just have to start making some kind of judgment about where you want to go as an artist. And I kind of really saw that close up when I was at the Royal College of Art, and was just looking at how everyone was going to the right openings at in the right galleries to see the people, and I just realised that I hadn't moved in to do photography or make my artwork by hanging out in those kind of spaces with those kind of people. So I didn't want to go down that path of becoming a gallery artist. And decided, well, the best way to fund myself would be to do public art commissions. Because my work's organic, and it needs to have a presence, and it is large scale, and it's not because of ego. It just does not I'm not saying it doesn't translate onto a smaller screen, but for me, it is this whole one of actually the surprise of coming across it within an urban setting that's actually out of context. So that's where my work is. It's not that I'm actively sort of fighting that whatsoever, the digital world in terms of it being on the net or the virtual galleries, but for me that it doesn't translate with my work.
I've always worked in photography wholly to finance my own preoccupations, which are really a sort of childhood state of being confused about the world and realizing that although photography, as Ralph Gibson said very beautifully, although photography depicts things very beautifully and exactly, nothing is what it seems to be. So there was always a sense of the oblique, the mysterious, the symbolic, the allegorical, the metaphorical, that I just found all around me in my environment and found myself wanting to record. The earliest memory that I can recover is lying there as a very, very young child watching dust in sunlight. I think, like a lot of people, the way that I felt about my experience differed from the world I was being taught about. And therefore I lived in a world of sensation and emotion that was not really explained by my parents, by going to school, by the sort of behaviours that you find yourself with your little friends and so on. So there was always something inside that was apart. It wasn't so much that it appeared to be something it wasn't, it was that it could be something else than it was commonly thought to be, and I thought that was incredibly exciting. So in that sense, it's almost like laying out a tarot as a sort of psychological diagnosis. I've called it psychological reportage, and it is what I've always done throughout my career. I think there's a point at which literature, painting and photography can be in direct dialogue with each other. It's an elusive thing, and I think if you're really ambitious for your work, that is where you might want to go.
It's meant to be one of the smallest galleries in the world, probably. No idea whether it is. Hiding behind here, and I don't have to talk to anybody, it's wonderful. It's the Empty Sardine Can Gallery, and this is how I spend most of my time. The Mad Hatter, he appeared, I don't know, about 6 years ago, I think. And he was then set out with a full display on the table of slightly odd objects. Made into industrial strength dream catcher. You've got to be a little bit careful with your catching your dreams, because you might start destroying stuff. That's one of my wife's shoes. Happy face. Oh, who's that? Oh, cave painting. Oh man, manly. Hieroglyphics. Evidence right in the corner over there. There was a moon landing. I'm pretty sure I was there. The balloon, I woke up one morning and I said to my wife, I wonder what would happen if you put expanding foam into a balloon. And she said, well, go and have a play with that in the workshop. If you don't come home back down within 2 hours, I'll go and rescue you.
I've really come from the collecting end of it. It's the 3D stuff first up with me. But I used to nail things all over my bedroom door and stuff when I was a child. It kind of had a big thick crust of objects. I used to collect a lot of hubcaps as well in the street. Always been picking stuff up. My dad used to take me fossil hunting in Dorset. I think maybe that looking for things all the time is. I still when I'm on the beach, I have to remind myself to bend my head up from the ground, you know, like to look at the sky, and then I pick up stuff things that are washed up is very, very nice things. Things that have come from, you don't know where they've come from, and especially when they've come from different places and then arrived together. I found the bottom of a light bulb and a rubber bulb once that went together very nicely. I made a picture out of that. I'm always looking for spherical pebbles because I have made pictures out of those, but I'm particularly interested in those because they're, you know, looking for the perfect one. I collect a lot of clothes, hats, shoes. I collect feathers but you can't keep them. They just get eaten by weevils. I like fossils and bones. Got a lot of bones. I'm collecting wishbones specifically to make pictures out of. I like to get a lot of things, like a large volume of stuff. Some stuff I collect because I think I might make a picture out of it, but often that's just an excuse. Going to the jumble sales is like hunting as well. It's like sort of, the joy of finding something nice. It's great excitement. I've often been involved in like recycled art shows and things, but I'm really not recycling. It's not recycling in the sense of kind of saving the planet by any means. It's just that I enjoy that someone else has had it and touched it and it's had another life, it's another functional purpose, and it's got a story to it.
Yeah, so I think that with lockdown, it allowed me to think about my work a bit more and take a step back and reflect more on kind of the practice that I'd like to continue, and think about my past work and where I'd like to go. So, for example, working slower, at a slower pace, and really focusing on subjects and objects and allowing my thinking to take control and seeing how that progresses. Hastings has got a really strong community of artists, and actually everyone's willing to help and support each other. And I started ceramics with Common Clay in Hastings and did an artist residency there. No, you don't have to show your work in a gallery. There's a whole movement about being able to show your work in an open space without walls, away, not within the white cube. There's land art, there's practice which isn't gallery related. However, some work they do actually need a white space to be able to function, to be able to be seen, to be stripped back away from distraction in order to focus on the work itself. Having that room and environment that sets up a piece, I think you see it differently. It allows you as a viewer and you as the artist to suddenly see the work rather than the stuff around the work. Maybe as an artist you can make work in any room, you can make it in your bedroom, but you can't necessarily show it in your bedroom. So there's lots of distractions, how do you photograph a piece of work? How do you place it? What if you don't work in where there's lots of light in your space, but a gallery space allows for those things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to be there and allow your work to be viewed as the work. It's something I've always thought about, and initially I thought about making work about my race and my heritage, but I haven't made work about race before. With the work that I did for Becky's work and during lockdown, it influenced it because it was from that space. So it was about supporting young black artists, and so I came in it with that mentality and thinking about, okay, maybe this is an opportunity where I can really question my race and start exploring those ideas. And I had those questions in my mind when I was making the work, but it didn't necessarily translate as work by a black artist. I also don't necessarily want to, I don't know, I think that for me, I've never really thought about my race being my identity. It doesn't, I feel quite strongly about it not being that. The same with being a woman. I feel like I'm a person and this is my art and this is what I make, and I don't necessarily want those two things to be the sole reason why I'm an artist.